Yeah, so finally, Professor Patrikar could connect with us. So I have the privilege to introduce our next speaker, Professor Rajendra Patrikar. So I know Professor Patrikar from last 15 years. Even during my PhD, also I had met him. About Professor Patrikar, he is professor at VNIT Nagpur at Center of VLSI and Nanotechnology. So he did his PhD from IIT Bombay. Actually, he finished in 1992 from Electrical Engineering Department of IIT Bombay. So after that, he was a faculty at IIT Bombay for some time. Then he moved to industries and he worked at Micron Institute of High Performance Computing. Then he moved back to India and worked with Computational Research Laboratory, Pune. So after that, he joined VNIT Nagpur, and means he's with VNIT Nagpur till date. So he works in the area of nanoelectronics, MEMS, and he has published quite a lot of papers, and also he has 4 patents with a US patent. So with that, so let me welcome Professor Patrikar again. And the title of his presentation is Signal Processing Using Nanoelectronics and MEMS. So Professor Patrikar, so now I think we'll record the session. So with your permission, we'll start recording. Yeah, so Ramya, so I mean, can you record, because I have not the right to record the
Yes,
session.
sir, we have started.
Yeah. So Professor Patrikar, so with that, I welcome you and please have your presentation.
Yeah. So good afternoon. I'm very sorry, usually because of technology today we are connecting to each other, but because of the technology we had this problem also. And this is like a Murphy's law. If something can go wrong, it will go at 125. I couldn't imagine till at 120 I was okay with everything. Yeah. So we'll just start with this some of the conceptions in this MEMS and nanoelectronics. So I thought I'll give a general sort of introduction. Usually we sort of try to divide our electronics into digital and analog, and then we would like to see what is happening little bit about this. So again, I mean, this probably in this symposium may not be necessary, but we have started with this transistor, and we had these 2 important events that when the Nobel Prize was given. So as you can see that the first Nobel Prize came little early, but second one took some time because nobody thought that it would have such a big impact. So integration of itself has become a sort of great invention. It is not that otherwise normally for the such kind of prizes they would look for the very fundamental type of inventions, whereas here you can see that the integration of some of these transistors also H1 prize, a big Nobel Prize. And that because, as you can see around, there is a big impact of the integration which we have seen. And this integration is followed by what we call is a miniaturization, and there are this number of advantages which are there. And there is quite a bit of advantages is from the electronics perspective. And usually these are discussed along with this whatever the scaling laws, etc., which we have. I wouldn't like to repeat all of them, but as you can see that whatever the meaning of these advantages which we get, usually it results into the better systems, and that is what we usually look for. And as you can see that in case of electronics, this became a very important, and there is a Gordon Moore's law which remained valid till up to late 2004, and then of course it is continuing in some or other form. But it has shown a lot of impact on overall electronics and the systems around us, because many systems are now are getting equipped along with electronics. We'll see them, some of them. And then we have this Moore's law, which is continuing, as you can say, till 2004 in some way, and then it continued actually. So we are sort of crossing what we call is the number of neurons in the human brain in a 15 centimeter cube, but that is something, the condition which we have here. We have this so-called nanoscale MOSFET, and this was a planar MOSFET, worked quite well up to 32 nanometer and even up to 22 nanometer. And then, of course, we had to change the shape of this transistor, but scaling continued. And that is what, up to 22 nanometer, there was not much problem. What is the implication of this? Was this on a price of this? And so there is this example which you can always look at the Amazon or somewhere. If you want to buy ScanDisk, how many transistors you can buy in 1 paise? So that comes out to be, as usual, very large number, about 7,28,000. But if you really see that any disk, it also comes out with the lot of other transistors for the decoder, sense amplifier, voltage regulator, charge pumps, etc. And then, so you can see that roughly you can get what we call is the 10 lakh transistors in 1 paise. And that is a very big impact overall on the businesses, overall on the systems which we are developing. And this is still continuing. That means you are likely to get 1 crore transistor in 1 paise very soon. So I don't know. We used to do practicals, and I remember during those days, one transistor used to come in 10 rupees, and that was very high cost. But now you can see that the prices in last 30, 40 years have dropped down like anything. So this, you can see that what you have to look for is the systems now, how elegantly you can use this transistor, and cost of transistors per transistor per se is now very less. And we are continuing with this scaling, and to avoid some of the short channel effects, we are using this three-dimensional structure of the transistor, although the lot of fundamentals of the transistors remain the same. So this is continuing, and as a result, what is happening that system design or VLSI design per se is changing quite a lot. It has become very complex because it is handling lot of transistors. Earlier in 1992, the design flow was fairly simple. It was called what you call is a waterfall type of a design flow, and you go from one state to another, and your chip was working. But that time there were about 2 million gates, and 100 megahertz was the speed. Over the years, things have changed a lot, and what is happening is that although the cost of transistor per transistor has reduced, the non-recurring engineering cost has not reduced. In fact, it has increased a lot. So as a result, what is happening that it is expected that your first pin will work, and which is sometimes impossible. But what one has to do is that even if it doesn't work, you should be able to identify why it did not work. And as a result, there is a lot of verification and formal checking and equivalence checking, etc. All those steps have been added, and some of these things also came with what you call is checking them simultaneously. So it is not that earlier it was like you start with RTL synthesis, placement, etc. But you simultaneously do some of these activities to see that your final chip is working. And that has been a sort of little bit burden on the design and design productivity. But somehow we are managing it so far, and there have been a lot of efforts on this. Meanwhile, there is a similar thing happen on the interconnects. Most of the chip is a interconnect, and interconnect systems have been developed. And after 180 nanometer, the way it happened is that these interconnects are giving more delays and problems than transistors. And one of the things which we had seen that the printing of this, when you start doing the planar process, the printing became difficult. Although again, this problem was solved by the what we call is optical proximity corrections, model-based corrections, etc. But so we have come down to sort of 65 nanometer and now below with a UV lithography, which is reducing. Actually, this lithography then helps us to reduce the cost. So your masks are looking different, etc. But things are okay. We are still continuing with the scaling here. The major thing which happened over the years about the concepts of this, whatever we are doing in terms of a digital domain, is that leakage power dissipation has increased a lot, and this was predicted or this was shown around 35 nanometer, and then at 180 nanometer, it was very evident that power dissipation can be a very big problem, and one has to stop it. So there is this power dissipation which has come. I mean, at 180 nanometer itself was like a hot plate, and I think many of us have seen that Intel Pentium processor is actually become a hot plate kind of thing. In our lab recently, we saw some of the old servers. This fan on the plate has got melted. I mean, the screws had come out. I mean, they were melted. So the temperature or the power dissipation in these chips became very high. So as a result of this, as you can see, it has impacted largely on the design also, that you could not increase the frequencies much, right? So earlier, before this, if you see this 8086, 386, 486, etc., and many of its version Pentium processors, particularly for Intel, there is to be a frequency increment with every generation. And that has sort of stopped around 2.5 megahertz. I mean, as they say, for the peak calculation, it is going up to 3 megahertz. The 3 gigahertz, but it is not increasing further. It is not scaling like what it used to be. And these temperature effects were showing on many chips. During the testing itself, some of the chips were blowing, and this thermal runaway became a very big problem. So as a result, what happened that we are looking at the parallelism now. So this multi-core design has become a key. So this Moore's law is nowadays restated. So we are saying number of cores will double every 18 months. And there are these examples where you can see that multi-processors or multi-core design has become a key. This is affecting largely also the software, the way software is being developed, the way systems are being developed. This parallelism has become a now key to all the software developments as well as system developments. But now this new Moore's law is progressing, and companies like NVIDIA and some of these other companies which are AMD or Intel, in every generation, you can see that number of cores is increasing. And that is becoming again big complexity in the design because you have to manage the cache memories, parallelism, etc. But still it is continuing. But what is happening in terms of a digital processing is that power is still a big issue. And as a result, what happens that if you want to go further, what is sort of observed is that you have to go to what you call is a 50 gigaflops per watt. And that is a target. So that is something which one has to achieve. And there is a lot of work going on where you would reduce the power. So what is done in terms of a digital processing is that now lot of work or lot of concentration in on this 50 gigaflops per watt type of a target. And of course, there has to be electron or whatever the transistors to help out this. But largely, a lot of other architectures and many other design issues are being handled to get this target. And so far up to whatever 2022, people are pretty confident and that we will go there. And up to at the year 27, they expect that there will be 50 gigaflops per watt target will be made. So this is largely to get a very high signal processing power, digital signal processing power, as well as the computation. So exascale computing is not possible with existing systems. So you can see that right now, whatever fastest digital systems are there, they're still in petaflops. They are going near to the hexaflop, but everybody knows that amount of power which is required for those kind of a computation, it is not possible with existing whatever power supply. And it is again whatever green earth, whatever the movement which is going on, uh, everybody feels that it is rather better to achieve this kind of a target to get a hexascale computing than going for just for the faster computation. But as you know that digital people are still, and this recently Bitcoin has again it demands a lot of digital processing. There is a whole village which is there just doing the Bitcoin minting, and the power supply required is so high for such systems. But anyway, hopefully people will meet this target, and then there will be the hexascale computing will come and will bring many nice systems and whatever the advantages you get out of this digital computation. So in between, what is happening that a lot of work has been done in this what you call is the nanoelectronics area. There is this new concepts I mean, there are new concepts which are coming up, and those are becoming very important. But that is everything is very new in the sense that understanding of the devices at the molecular scale. There's a new tool for the metrology, new materials, the unit processes for directed self-assembly, so that as you can see that when your dimensions are reducing, doing lithography becomes a problem. So maybe the self-assembly processes can help. There will be new devices for new applications, and new architectures for ultra dense system, which is expected for its exascale computing, etc. And finally, we have a terascale electronics, which is possible that right now we talk about billion transistors on chip, but then there will be trillion transistors on the chip. Without increasing too much area, we will have this miniaturization. So sometimes there is this confusion about nanotechnology and nanoelectronics. Some people use it as it is, but as you know that the nanotechnology people wouldn't like to call nanoelectronics the way we define the nanotechnology, because in nanoelectronics we are continuously scaling the dimensions, but we are not altering the synthesis or the fabrication process. Whereas the nanotechnology is sort of correlated also with the new fabrication methods, and certainly not as costly as lithography, which is a major problem as of today. So there is a lot of work going on in both of these things. But we understand what it is, because a lot of these concepts from the nanotechnology are also being brought up into the electronics or nanoelectronics. And we defined nanoelectronics wherever there are dimensions, some of the dimensions which we have to resolve for fabrication is a nanoelectronics. But that should be not a big problem. And then the nanoelectronics encompasses a lot of devices like ultra-scale FETs, quantum single electron devices, resonant tunneling diodes, etc. And there is a motivation there in the sense that the limits of conventional CMOS technology is showing up. As we know that device physics of a scaling, not too much advantages. It is giving problem. We are going into quantum domain. Interconnects are another issue, particularly interconnects are not scaling. Particularly the global interconnects are the major problem. So we are seeing we have a multi-core design. That means we have too many cores. We want to connect to each other. Then the length of the interconnects is increasing. And then if you see the power dissipation as well as delays posed by these interconnects are not offer too much advantages. So naturally, one has to sort of look at the alternatives. Whereas there are these alternatives which are there, nanoelectronic alternatives. You have these negative resistance devices, switches, and it is expected that the way we make these systems will be having this uh, advantages, but different topologies of the circuits, different topologies of the systems which will be there. And then we have this quantum computing, sensing and biological interfaces, self-assembly and biomimetic behavior. A lot of work is being done on this because that is something saving a lot of power also. So, for example, this biomimetic behavior is still not understood in every case, but it is very promising in the sense that right now, for example, they have studied some of these birds migrating during the winter from the very cold area to this other areas, and then they see the amount of fuel which is required for that migration is so less, and amount of energy which we consume for transportation in the aeroplanes, etc., is not even a comparable. That means there is a promise there that if we understand how those people, I mean, all those species are transporting themselves, can help us in understanding the some of these systems, and then if we can mimic it in our systems, transportation system will save a lot of power. But of course, there are these issues. Generally, the predicted performance improves with decreased dimension, which is called law of acceleration with this dimension also. But then smaller dimension increase sensitivity to fluctuations, manufacturability and reproducibility is a problem. Limited demonstrations and system demonstration has been done, and a lot of things are required. And in a way, it is good that maybe some of these systems eventually will come up, and we can take advantage of this. A lot of work can be done in these areas. So some of these things which are happening right now is try to use a CMOS and the nanotechnology. So there are these interconnects which are being made there, where you have a CMOS technology for a transistor as well as some metal layers, but then finally you use some of these crossbar kind of structures here, where you can use 2D materials or graphene or the wires, nano wires. And then there are these other issues which probably can be solved. So this, for example, we started with aluminum, then we went to copper, and now what people are doing is that using copper, and top of that there is a carbon nanotube, and as I know that graphene is also being tried. This is what is being tried by Infineon, but some of these other companies, TSMC, etc., they are also working on graphene, on copper to reduce the resistance. So as you can see that maybe eventually only nanotubes will be used for interconnects, and they have a tremendous advantage there. So for example, copper can take about 1 million ampere per square centimeter, and that is the limit with which we have to work. Whereas carbon nanotubes can take 1 billion amperes. So you can see per square centimeter, of course. So you can see that there is a distinct advantage with these systems or with newer material, newer approaches. And that is likely to help more in the coming years. So in general, what is happening that if you see that what we are or a lot of research work is being done. And then there is this multi-dimensional electronics is there. So when we we had a bipolar transistor, the current was flowing like in a three-dimensional this. So collector was almost collecting the electrons in three-dimensional this. With MOS transistor, it is not true 2D device, but since there was no motion of electrons in z direction, and the most of the current was in a two directions. Then came nanowire, its transistor and other things. So you can see that its physics is changing, and you have a lot of advantage with that. And eventually we have what we call is the zero dimension or quantum dots, where there is a there is current transport or the electron transport need not occur, but altering its energy states can give you the useful information. So the quantum dots and nanocrystals are considered zero-dimensional devices. Nanowires are one-dimensional. MOS transistor, or rather, there is a material like a graphene, MOS2, etc. Those are what the systems which are a two-dimensional system. So essentially, you see that the basic physics of these systems alter, and then it gives rise to new properties, and you can have new devices built on that. So you can see that this nano wires, for example, there is so many sort of advantages and so many devices have been demonstrated. You have a sort of electronics where you have a quantum wire for interconnects, diodes and transistors for computing, data storage, then capacitors, field emitter for instrumentation, and also for a flat panel displays. So there are this so many advantages, and there are of course challenges which we have, researchers are trying to meet. You have a control of diameter and chirality. So this is something again with the synthesis. Can we get correct diameter with every synthesis cycle, like what we are getting in the transistors? Now, of course, there is what we call is that tolerances are there, but that is too much variation. That will be there will be too much variation when you look at the nanowires, and can we limit it to certain values? Then there is a doping and contacts which are there. Contacts is a major problem. People are trying to solve it through various different topologies, as well as by using different materials and device design. But eventually, sort of to use them in the system which we use, you have to bring it to PCB, and then the contacts have to be made with copper or aluminum or some of these materials. And if the contact resistances are very high, which is the case right now with nano wires particularly, then the whole advantage of this transportation go. So one has to look at the contacts issue, and then you need a novel architectures to handle this. Uh, Development of inexpensive manufacturing process is a challenge. Similarly, I mean, some of these things are being used for what you call the sensors and actuators also. And these nanowires have shown a promise in many of these applications. CNT-based microscopy, uh, atomic force microscopy, SEM, STEM, etc. Nanotube sensors, of course, are being demonstrated. Molecular gears, motors, so microelectromechanical systems have been demonstrated. Then there are batteries, which is because the power and the energy, or in general, has become a major issue. So we have these many systems which are being developed with these nanowires. Uh, so you can see that if you look at just the nanowires, particularly these are the say carbon nanotubes, can give you many sort of can be used in many applications. Those applications are likely to be cheap, much better, etc. And some of these things have been, I mean, many of these things have been demonstrated some time back, but major issues are, as you can see, that in the fabrication techniques, manufacturing techniques, where we have to take it from the lab to the mass scale. And but a lot of work is being done, and as you know that initially even the CMOS technology faced the criticism that it may not show that kind of manufacturability, etc. But eventually, now it took over all the challenges, and you have CMOS technology, which has given so many big results. So same thing may happen in nanowires also, and there is a lot of work going on in this. So you can see that this demonstration as a CNT as a PET, which was done, which is very famous by this IBM people, and this start. In fact, this was there in the beginning of the century, and they say this is one of the invention which is likely to sort of influence a lot of research and other developments. And a lot of work is being done, not yet shown in applications, but may come anytime. The people have also shown similar thing, this gallium nitride nanowire. So there was organic nanowire, this is the inorganic nanowire, but you can make a transistor. And now, as you know, that below 5 nanometer technologies, most of the transistors will be nanowire type of a transistors. So all this research eventually may sort of show the lot of promise in the CMOS kind of environment also, where then you can use CMOS topologies and other circuitry which we build with a MOS transistor. We can have the nanowire transistors there. But there are these other applications also at the nano level. So Charles Lieber has shown that you can use as a UV nano LEDs, and then there can be internal structures. The communication within the structures can be optical through this kind of LEDs. And then you have this gas sensor, which is always researched because of the environmental monitoring and for other industrial applications. And the nano sensors or nanotube based gas sensors are showing a lot of promise. You can see that they have a different distinct voltages and the current where you can detect them. And there is a toxic gas detection and removal in life support system in the space vehicles. Probably can be done with this kind of a systems. The nanotube-based field emitters, particularly, so you can see that Samsung has made this field emission display, which will be much better, much cheaper compared to OLED or other displays which we are using. And a lot of demonstration has been done, but manufacturing will take some time. But eventually, these are likely to come up very soon now. You can also see that the instrumentation, which is recently, probably it has been used by NASA for micro focus X-ray tubes for a detection. So when on the Mars, if you want to detect some of these, what are the minerals and available, and what are the constituents of the material, and you require X-ray for that, those X-rays can be taken with this small X-ray tube. So you don't have to transport a whole big X-ray machine, which has also become a portable now, but you can have this nano wire based X-ray tube, and it can send you the pictures on a CCD, pictures detected by CCD, and then you can analyze it. So some of these interesting applications have come out, and hopefully this will be used for other applications on Earth also. It need not be just on the Mars. And finally, these nanowires, and this has been showed by many times, can be used as a router, their Y-junction and four-terminal junction. This can be used as a gates also. So the whole electronics can be done with just some of these atoms which are connected in the form of nanowires. And you need not connect it as a separate devices need not be connected to these wires. It is like a wire door, wire hand, which we use these techniques in a digital electronics wherever possible. Here you can see that nano wires, it will be possible, and you can see that it can be a router, it can be then can be gate, and you can evaluate this output, etc. So some of these work, molecular electronics with nanowire, is also gaining popularity. Again, of course, this work also, although it has been demonstrated at the lab level, uh, the demonstration at the manufacturing level or on the high-scale systems yet awaited. But there is a lot of scope to do this kind of work. Then there is this quantum dots or zero-dimensional dots which are there, and you can see that these dots which are there have this quantum confinement effect that is exploited for many of these applications, but there are many other interesting applications which are there. So one of the speciality of these quantum dots is that you have a very simple process can get a multi-layer quantum dots, and there is abundant dots which you can create, and there are standard chemical methods by which this can be done. So this is the chemical collider method which you can use. Some of these things even we could do in our small chemistry room, uh, create a quantum dots of the silver particles, etc. And that is chemistry people have come out with the various processes by which this can be done. We just have to follow their work. And of course, other work which is the self-assembly. This is what we had also done at IIT Bombay. We could make the the aluminium, or so in this case, polysilicon quantum dots or silicon quantum dot. They are not polysilicon. We had a polysilicon deposition and then lattice mismatch principle. By annealing it, we could get these dots, and again we can get abundant of them. So advantage here is that the manufacturing is not difficult, although the control dimensions of these can be very difficult. And some of these things are they are sort of made of various substrate, gallium arsenide substrate, and many other substrates are used. Finally, lithography can be used, but this is a costly method, and here it will be limited. I mean, number of dots which you can resolve. And right now, such lithographies are done with the E-beam lithography, and naturally, then it is not a mass base, so it is not a batch process. It has to be done on individual die, which is difficult sometimes. But these quantum dots are being used for many applications, and this is the one application which is a sort of signal processing application which you can see. So this is sort of proposed and being researched for the astronaut health and biomedical application. So this Apollo 11 mission took 8 days, but if you want to go to Mars, it is going to take 8 months. And astronauts will be exposed to effect of space radiation. So there is a possibility that astronauts may catch this cancer, and then that will be very problematic because they'll be going 8 months. Even if you want to bring them back, they are likely to come back after 8 months. So what happens to their treatment? So that's why some of these manned missions of the Mars are being delayed. But as you can see that these cancer cells, they give us certain signals. Now we have to process them to detect and then use them for a therapeutic purpose, diagnostic purpose, etc. So what is happening with the quantum dots is that the way scientists are saying, they shine these cancer cells. So if they are hidden somewhere, and if you add the quantum dots and use the fluorescence methods to detect it, then you can sort of see that the cancer cells are being developed. So they can be even quantitatively detected. Uh, so if you want to use this kind of a system, so you can see that your whatever this cancer signal is there, its processing is in a different way, but it can be detected. You have a lot of literature on this, and now these are the methods which are used, and some of the universities like a University of Toronto, etc., there doing research to reduce the cost of it, because they feel that right now the cost of detecting this is a problem using quantum dots, because quantum dots are pretty costly, and to use for such kind of applications you need its size and shapes in a certain form, and then only they can detect, because that's how the light shine on that, and then you detect the reflected light. You get different types of patterns, and then you have to detect this. But you can see that the applications, because of these quantum dots, can be different, and so this is a promising thing, and it is not just for the electronics which we are going to use. Of course, there is a big literature or whatever big applications which are being developed for the quantum computing, that qubits can be represented by the quantum bit dots, and then you can have a huge computation, etc. But that is a sort of different application which we are looking at. So there is this why quantum dot transistors are being made, and here the quantum computing can be done, maybe even at the room temperature, but it is not right now, but in future maybe. And right now you can see that there are issues. The primary design require extremely low temperatures, and possible room temperature design should require 10 nanometer features, which is very small to control, and also to fabricate large amount of them. And eventually material fabrication is not on silicon. Different materials have used, and potential solutions are there. The improved 3,5 compounds and other materials can be used. But this is another area where one can look for a different type of aspects, and different materials, and detection particularly is a challenging. But many devices have been proposed and fabricated here. So this is about something about nanoelectronics. As you can see that there is a promise there, and one has to do work in particular area. So as it has happened in case of the CMOS technology or general electronics, it takes a while. I mean, whenever you conceptualize the device, then fabricate in the lab, and from lab to manufacturing, even the CMOS devices like a FinFET. FinFET took 20 years, 22 years of work to bring it for the manufacturing. And some of these things which are proposed will also take a lot of time, but eventually they may come. And whenever they come in manufacturing, you can see that they will give a tremendous advantage there. So right now, so we'll just switch the gear towards the mains little bit, and what is happening at the right now, whatever the systems which we are developing. And there is a major focus which you can see in the market is to make these things smart actually. So right, you had a lot of computers, mainframe computers were there, PCs were there, then the mobile phones computing came, and now we are looking at this smart things. So what I'm going to do is that quickly sort of go through what we have been doing in this, making things smart, or whatever protocols and other things which are being used. But this is a key, or right now people are looking in electronics for the businesses at least. And what we are calling it as internet, or internet of things. So we had sort of number of people on the earth are limited, but number of systems which we are making is pretty large. And as you can see that human beings are in the range of some 700 crores or whatever, but the machines can be 5,000 crores or whatever more. And as a result, there is a challenge to connect them. And so number of things connected in 2008, it crossed the human beings, because a lot of human beings are not, first of all, connected, and children as well as the very old people are not likely to use the internet. And then some areas where there's a resource constraints are there, people are not using internet. Whereas machines which are being developed in a developed countries usually come out with the systems where they connect to the internet. And as a result, this is sort of what you call is the Internet of Things, which is becoming very popular there. And this is being now extended that you have an interplanetary internet. Right now, if you are sort of looking in NASA websites or their Instagram or whatever, every day they are giving a lot of pictures about this. So all this communication is happening over the internet. So there is the interplanetary internet which is being proposed. And so essentially what we are doing is that whatever the system which we have has to be connected to the internet. Human beings are definitely connected to the internet, and this connected world is being created. But we at electronics, we look at what we call is the physical layers, right? So a lot of this work has been done in computer science and other this also, where they look, but we look at the physical layer, and that is what we are also doing here. And there are different challenges which are there. There are different standards which are being developed for this physical layer. So you can see that this 802.15.4 ZigBee is what is used for this IoT where machines are connected, because machines are not going to use send lot of data, or at least lot of research is being used for that also, that they send the minimum data, and then they are being collected somewhere in what we call is a base station, and from base station it is connected to the internet. So this takes graphics, etc. Is transmitted through this ZigBee, and this is our project in this SMDP C2SD devices, C2SD project, that we developed this physical layer here. So what we found that this RF transmitter is one of the key challenge here. And as you can see that in the phones also, that is a key challenge. Our phone can connect to a lot of standards. So internally, that circuitry which we see is sort of using a lot of these tanks and filters to get into the different bands of these frequencies, and then the different protocols and baseband software then works to detect the data, or to convert the data into useful form actually. So this is what our ZigBee module which is there. So what we found that although right now we are also using 180 nanometer technology, this is sort of good enough sort of method where we sort of use normal transistors for this. But you can see that whatever is happening in a digital domain, when you miniaturize the transistor, that is not possible in the analog domain. So you can see that this miniaturized transistor, their speed and gain, they are sort of don't go hand in hand. If you have a lot of gain, then output resistance has to be little higher. Then the speed decreases, and if the speed is higher, then the gain has to be compromised. Then right now with the smaller transistor, your supply voltages have reduced, so your signal headroom is now very less. You cannot use big sort of uh, rail to rail voltage has reduced. So then there is a limitation on how much you can amplify, etc. With reduced dimension, low frequency noise is high. Then you have a sort of matching problems which comes with these dimensions. Earlier, we sort of safely assumed that whenever we fabricate two transistors on the same die, their properties do match, but that is not guaranteed when you sort of reduce the dimensions. Gate leakage currents are sort of dominating the scene many times. And so your bias currents, which are required for the analog applications, can fluctuate, and the design becomes very challenging there if there is a gate leakage which is there. And finally, the linearity which is expected in the miniaturized devices can get compromised because of these other issues which are there, and largely because of the gate leakage current and the short noise and other parameters which comes. So this, whenever you sort of reduce this dimension, you will see that analog electronics or analog signal processing have more challenges than the digital domain, because all these challenges have to be made there. But still, we are using this 180 nanometer technology. There is a standard sort of methodology which is there, and these circuits have been fabricated. And we have this at SCL, we have this 180 nanometer technologies which we have seen. But we faced a lot of challenges here when we saw this. Power dissipation is also pretty high at 180 nanometer, and many of these chips, as they are saying, for the IoT application, require that they work for 10 years on a small battery may not be possible with this kind of technologies. So, but what we saw that right now, the way people are working in this area is that they don't do signal processing with the transistors itself, but they use the MEMS also there. So you have an antenna, then you use a filter with a very high Q, right? So your requirement for LNA goes, and then you do the demodulation again with the COM kind of a filter. Eventually, you will take a electronic. You will require some electronics, but sometimes these things can be used as a wake-up receivers, etc. And overall power consumption in such systems is less. And many of the problems which you saw in case of the miniaturized transistor may not be there here. So that is a major advantage which is there with this RF MEMS, and that is coming out because of the very high Q which is required there. So what is happening that this typical, we are just concentrating on this small, what we call as the resonators. So you can see that whatever the next, right now we are talking about 5G, but people have started working on the 6G also. Essentially what happens that this RF front end, which is there on all those systems, it comprises of the amplifier, filters, duplexers, clocks, switches, etc. And this clock sets the frequency such that window is open at the right position in the RF spectrum, and RF filter ensures that window has the right width to pass data at the needed bandwidth. And that's how we are managing these several generations and several bands which are there and several applications. So right now there are about 20 bands with the advent of 5G, because 5G is going to stay for long. We will require about 40 bands as it is expected. So you require a sort of filtering of these 40 bands, and that is pretty challenging. So this 5G right now, and which is sort of improvement over 4G LTE, which includes increased data capacity, lower latency, etc. And as you know that recently the Apple phones, they have started fixing this 5G module, and it was a big news which is there. And of course, the 5G has a lot of advantages. 6G will have more advantages, etc. But these filters become a very challenging, and you require almost 100 RF filters, which is to be fit in the smartphone. So again, as you know, that we are not going to compromise on the area of the filters. Sorry, the area of the smartphone. That means I have to fit this 100 RF filters with very good properties within that small area which I am going to get. And that is probably not possible with the classical transistorized circuit and its power dissipation and everything. So this need of the bandpass filter, whatever the filter we are going to consume, should have a lot of steep skirts, large bandwidths, and low insertion loss, high out of band suppression, so that they don't mix with each other. Power dissipation has to be low. And that is how all these requirements are there, and you will see that they are not easily made with the classical kind of electronics filter or which LC or even the active filters which we make, and the MEMS technology is the only alternative for that. And you can see that this is what the filter part which we will look for, that it should have a low insertion loss. It is a very sort of steep skirts which are there, so that there is a coexistence of another band which is nearby, and the out of band rejection is very high, so that you can have a multi-band analysis here. And that is what you are looking for. And if you take our normal LC circuit built on a chip, you'll find it very difficult, including by using some of the smaller transistors, which will come with problems which we have discussed. So what you do is that you use these resonators for this filtering. So there is the input transistor which is there. You have a vibrating structure, physical vibration, and then there is the output transducers which are here. So this is a sort of simple concept which will be there. You have a sort of fed to this, which is the driving electrode. There's in between, there is a resonating beam is there, and this is a sensing electrode which is there. So you can see that this can resonate at one frequency only. So whenever there is this frequency, this bar is also resonating at that frequency, then only there will be transmission here. Otherwise, there will not be any transmission. Otherwise, all other frequencies will be filtered out. And this DC bias ensures that there are charges so that enough energy can be transmitted to the sensing electrode here. So this is the idea of the mains resonator, which is there. But whenever you build this such system for the practical applications, you will see that you require a lot of design methodologies. People have been trying this lot of type of resonators, and this is little old actually, but this is IIT Kharagpur had collected this sort of information, and you can see that various sizes and shapes are being used right now to sort of get a resonators here. And but there is a full-fledged design methodology which gets involved to build such resonators or filters here. So theoretical, I mean, method which is there is that you have a sort of whatever the method which you want to use, or the device, resonating device which you want to use here, and that will be the base, and then you have to choose the physical parameters of this device to get the actual picture. So I know that we have a very less time now. I'll quickly just go through some of this design method. This I will share later, but this is very standard procedure, textbook procedure which is there. What you go do is that you sort of calculate the frequencies here, right? So whatever the center frequency, for example, we want to get the 2.4 gigahertz, right, for this Zigbee type of a protocol filter. So you would sort of go for the 2.4 gigahertz design here, and then it will have a various modes which it will show up. What you have to do is that clamp the modes which you don't require. You get and then use the frequencies of whatever the interest, and then that mode has to be used for your application here. So this is again can be done with the electrical type of a design. You get the electrical equivalence of it, and then build the circuit by suppressing other modes by physically during the fabrication, and then pick up that signal, VAC signal, and this resonator will act like a whatever LC circuit equivalence which you can build with the very less L which R which is there in this, so that your power dissipation is there, because it is not physically connected here. So this is how, for example, this FEM model of the resonator can be made, and then you can decide whatever the frequencies of the interest which are there. So you can see that there is a, if this is clamped at 2, you will get this 2 signal. So here at the output, then you can clamp at 4, and then you can pick up the 4, but you can suppress also. So for example, if I want to 2.4 gigahertz, I'll suppress rest of things by clamping them, and my sensing will be done for this frequency only. So you get a very nice queue for such systems, but remember that you don't want such kind of a queue. In fact, if you are a designer for circuit and if you have a very high queue circuit, it is very difficult to design band limited sort of a circuit here. So we want this kind of a circuit response from this resonator. Now, to get this resonator response, you have to send further workout, and then for that, what you call what you have to use is a coupled resonator. So you need not use only one resonator, but you use what you call is a two resonators actually. So what will happen that eventually, when you look at the combined response of this, and this combined response because of this coupling spring, which is usually lambda by 4 length, will give you the different shapes and sizes. And again, you have to choose what exactly you want in your application. So you can do this two-port analysis and the displacement of this disk and the rings, whatever you are using. And then the complete analysis.
I think Mr. Patrikar, so we have another session starting at 3.
Yeah, I know. Right.
So if we should give some time for the participants to have some questions, right? So
Right. So I'll be only 1 minute. My last slide will be there, just 1 minute. So after this coupling, right, what will happen that you'll get a different modes there. You'll get of your interest mode, and then you'll get a response like this, which is what we call the low velocity response. But then you have to sort of look for what response you want and add few more coupling this. So eventually you will get this kind of response. And when you terminate this, right, so you will get whatever appropriate response which you want for your circuit. So this is the overall design process by which you can still design the different type of resonators. Actually, we had fabricated some such resonator, which we fabricated simple resonators, and but you really get whatever desired performance of these resonators, which is required for your circuits. So I would like to stop here because I think I initial maze I started a little late, but I think although we couldn't start on time, at least we should finish on time. That's what I would like to do. So thank you for this. So I will just go to last slide to say thank you. But we had essentially fabricated this device, and we also tested in our lab. And some of these design and fabrication possible at, I mean, we did it at IIT Bombay, but I'm sure there are other centers which can do this. Okay, thank you.
okay, so let's thank Professor Patrikar for the very nice informative presentation. So I think we have a few minutes for the participants and see if they have any questions. So okay, they means I think you could unmute and ask questions here.
There is one question in the chat box.
Yeah.
What is the current technology used in industry that is in 2021?
Sorry, about technology in for 1 minute.
For is not given, sir. It is like, what is the current technology used in the industry that is in 2021? Manish Kumar, you can unmute your mic and you can just clarify the question you want to ask.
1 minute. I'll look at the chat box. So here, what is the current technology? So right now, I mean, most of the current technology is about 7 nanometer. So if you are talking about transistors, so a lot of work is being done. I mean, a lot of chips are being designed for 7 nanometer, and some people are working for 5 nanometer. And there is this collaboration which for the 3 nanometer is also there. So, but this is a classical nanoelectronics. Yes.
Okay, so I think I don't see any more questions in the chat box, but I have one question. So how you to, because when we talk about signal processing, and we need to do signal processing at very low power, right? So what are the different techniques? Because we are all now talking about IoTs and all of those things, which actually we need to process a lot of things at the low power. So I mean, but our nano electronics, when talking about nano electronics, nano transistor, they are power hungry, right? So how to mix both of these things together? Low power, but with nano electronics.
Yeah, so I think a lot of this work, particularly in the MEMS area, what they're doing is that combining with this thing. So, for example, whatever this work, resonators work, which is going on, is for the wake-up receiver. So, what will happen is that the wake-up receiver do maximum job. Right now, what is happening in IoT is that you get a signal, then you have to identify whether this signal is for your node or not. If it is not for your node, you have to route it further. Now, if you wake up the whole receiver system, that consumes a lot of power. As you say, it's a power hungry. So instead of doing that, this work, only this work, that whether this whatever the signal which has come is for this module or not, this is checked up by this wake up receiver. And the power consumption that for that wake up receiver is less than nanowatts, because it is using these MEMS devices, and it just checks whether this signal is for this node or not. Otherwise, it doesn't do anything. So there is a
Okay.
lot of saving which can happen with such topology. So you have to have a multi-pronged approach which has to be used. So this is one of the approach which is there. Also, you will see that the MEMS-based device, I mean circuits, anyway consume very less power compared to, as you say, nanowire, nano transistors. It is not power hungry at all. In fact, it is not consuming power.
So that's fine, but the MEMS-based devices are a bit slow, right? How to synchronize when the speed of MEMS device with the speed of electronics?
So you can see that MEMS are also going up to 2.4 gigahertz, and many people have reached to 4.7 gigahertz, etc. Newer materials, newer type of a physical design can take it to higher frequencies also. So, for example, recently, I mean, in US, they had fabricated this Nugen fabricated for the 4.8 gigahertz also, and demonstrated almost industry kind of a circuit. So there is a work, I mean, a lot of work is there going on and has to be done. But you are right. I mean, there's generally they are slow and they have to be worked out for the higher this thing. But it is happening. This contour mode devices, etc., are very promising at very high frequencies also.
Okay. So thank you. I think for the interest of time, we have to stop here. So we have another session starting at 3, and it's already a few minutes past 3. So let's thank Professor Patrikar, and it was a very nice, informative talk, Professor Patrikar, and we are obliged to you for this nice presentation.
Thank you very much.
So thank you again. And I think I'll ask, I mean, we have some e-memento. I think Ramya will share this. So
Ramya?
everything is, yeah. So the memento is shared only for a few seconds.
Okay, good. Yeah, thank you. I got.
Memento is on the
No,
way.
sir, I have not yet shared. There was some issue. I'll just share it. It's not only for 2 seconds.
Oh, I got it.
I'm just.
It's on the way.
So, but the technology has enabled us to meet even in this pandemic situation. So you have to thank nanoelectronics, nanotechnology, whatever
Yes,
technology.
yes, sure. Yes, yes, correct. I mean, oh, good,
Okay,
good.
so
Thank
so
you.
let's thank Professor Patrikar.
Thank you very much for the momentum. Good, nice.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we have to close this session now.
Sir,
So
before
I'll
closing,
thank-
we'll have a virtual photo. I request all the participants to turn on your cameras so that we'll have a snap. And I have a reminder to the participants. The feedback link is posted in the chat box, and the link will be active only for 10 minutes. Kindly make sure that you're going to submit the response before time.
So Ramya, you have to turn on.
Don't hesitate. Turn on your cameras so that we'll have a good snap. Thank you.
Thank you.
But you didn't say cheese, right? We don't know whether we made the right face or not. Okay, so Thanks, all of you, and let's move to the next session. I think there is another link. You have to join that meeting.
So we have a
Hello.
5 minute refreshment break. After a 5 minute, we'll join the new meeting.
Okay.
And the new meeting is posted in the chat window. Thank you, Dr. Nihar, for chairing the session very nicely.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I request the participants to kindly check the chat box so that you'll find the feedback link of the session too. And the participants who have missed the first feedback link for the first session, I'm just reposting it again. You can just go through the link